we've all worked some crazy jobs in our lifetimes here on Earth. Like, I swear my resume would rival that of Trish's from Austin and Ally, if anybody gets that reference. It's not quite Barbie levels of chaos or length yet, but never say never. I think I saw the grossest stuff when I was working my first real job at a grocery store, but I totally could have blocked out some stuff from the summer I managed a cafe. Yeah, my life's pretty interesting. Question for you: what's the grossest job you've ever worked? Let me know in the comments, and let's travel back to the Wild West together. Ever heard of a resurrectionist? Many medical minds in the 18th and 19th centuries saw human dissection not just as a medical must, but also a vital part of the justice system. Oh, you don't believe me? The Company of Surgeons in London became legally obligated to conduct public dissections of killers in 1752. Not exactly an example from the Wild West, I know, but this was a prevalent practice there with all of the angry mobs. I promise. However, there were only so many killers to go around, and with a seemingly never-ending need for cadavers, some people became body snatchers, or technically speaking, resurrectionists. While the job was lucrative, it was also dangerous and freaking disgusting. Bodies weren't embalmed at the time, so they'd rot incredibly quickly. Sure, I might romanticize the grave robber from Repo, but that's because of his allure, not his profession, and because I can't smell him through the screen, since that would probably be an immediate turn-off. So while we're on the subject, being a grave digger wasn't much better. It was a challenging and often grim occupation shaped by the harsh realities of life on the frontier. These folks often worked in remote locations, far from established settlements. Ergo, they faced isolation and had very limited access to resources and support. They had to deal with extreme weather, including scorching heat, bitter cold, and unpredictable storms, which bad weather can get messy. Digging graves by hand was backbreaking work, especially in the rocky, dry soil of the West. The labor was physically demanding and could take a toll on the body, particularly during long hours of digging and really bad weather. Grave diggers also faced risks beyond the physical labor of digging. They were exposed to the risk of contracting diseases from handling decomposing bodies, as well as the potential for injury from sharp tools, falling debris, or accidents. The constant exposure to death could also have some really bad psychological effects. My back hurts just thinking about it. A slightly classier job was being a ranch hand, but only very slightly. Like, barely. It was obviously a very rough and tough and often dirty job. Ranch hands worked long hours performing physically demanding tasks such as herding cattle, branding livestock, mending fences, and repairing equipment. The work was often strenuous and required strength, endurance, and skill. From dawn till dusk, these folks were out in the elements, working hard to keep the operations running smoothly. This time period was known for its harsh and dusty environment. These ranch hands spent their days riding horses through the rugged terrain, enduring dust storms, and facing exposure to the elements. I know, I keep mentioning it, and I'm gonna keep mentioning it. The work was dirty, with hands and clothes caked in mud, sweat, and dust by the end of the day. Also, ranch hands often slept in bunkhouses or tents, with very limited access to bathing facilities or clean clothes. Like, I don't even want to picture the diseases that would pass through a place like that. Ever hear the phrase, "I'm gonna tan your hide" for saying that? Well, tanning hides was less of a threat, more of a job back in the day. Obviously, it was a very dirty and odorous job, characterized by a series of messy and labor-intensive tasks. This gig began with the initial step of acquiring raw animal skins, which often came from cattle, sheep, deer, or other animals raised or hunted in the area. These hides are typically covered in red fluids, flesh, and hair, requiring meticulous cleaning before the tanning process could begin. Ranch hands, or hunters, would bring the freshly harvested hides to the tannery, where they would be sorted and prepped for processing. The first step involved removing any of that said remaining flesh, fat, connective tissue, which is so gross. After fleshing, the hides are typically soaked in a solution of water and lime to loosen the hair and to prepare it for the process. This step often produced a foul odor, as the lime reacted with the organic matter, creating a pungent smell that permeated the air. Additionally, the hides had to be stirred or agitated regularly to ensure even treatment, further adding to the mess and the icky odor. Overall, tanning hides was a dirty, smelly, and labor-intensive job that required skill, patience, and a strong stomach. All things I don't have. Okay, I'm gonna stop with farm jobs for a moment. Oh, here's a doozy. Cleaning up after an angry mob. Hey, those were pretty prevalent at the time. Somebody had to do it. Let me count thy ways, this job was ickier than most. Mob violence at the time could result in severe injuries or fatalities, leading to pools of various bodily fluids, corpses, and other organic matter, which would contaminate the area. Cleaning up these fluids required physical contact with potentially infectious materials, posing health risks to those tasked with the cleanup. Also, vandalism was pretty prevalent, so cleanup also involved sorting through broken glass, splintered wood, and other hazardous materials to restore order to the affected area. And trust me, speaking from experience, working with shattered glass is hazardous to your health. For reference, I perform with the stuff. I've got a bucket of it in my living living room. I know what I'm talking about. So let's just say you're on the other side of things and you were a bounty hunter. Yeah, sorry, it's still gross work. It was a very gritty and challenging profession, full of danger and discomfort. Bounty hunters often pursued dangerous criminals who were willing to resort to violence to evade capture. This meant facing off against individuals who may have been unwashed, unkempt, and living rough in the wilderness for extended periods. The close contact with fugitives could expose bounty hunters to really bad conditions and, once again, bad smells. Okay, how about this? They had to go through rugged landscapes, they had to go through the forest, they had to go through the desert, they went through every single area, dealing with long days of trekking through mud, dust, underbrush. Well, you're gonna get some filthy, sweat-soaked clothing and equipment, which that's not comfy and also hygiene. So let's say a reward was offered for somebody dead or alive, and you needed proof that they were dead? Well, that proof could be a severed head, a recognizable body part. So let's add that evidence, combined with the fluids, gore, and decomposition associated with dead bodies. I don't know about you, but for me that makes the handling of rewards a repulsive and nauseating task, so we're gonna nope out of that one. This might be an obscure job. Ever heard of a pure finder? Well, body waste was very useful throughout history, and it turns out dog poop was no exception. It was used as a drying agent by tanneries to make leather. The rules of supply and demand meant that collecting dog poop became a full-time job for people called pure finders, who roamed their area on the hunt for dog droppings. The job was certainly dirty, but it was very profitable, and at the time, enviable. It was a great enterprise, before competition became too fierce. I know beggars can't be choosers, but once again, there was no way I could have stomached doing this one. I know I'm a nitpicky person, but I mean that in the literary sense, not the actual job. Being a nitpicker in the Old West was undoubtedly a grim and unpleasant job, but served a vital purpose in addressing the hygiene and health concerns of the time. Nitpickers were tasked with removing lice and their eggs, known as nits, from the hair and clothing of individuals who were infested with these parasites. Lice infestations were common in crowded and unsanitary living conditions, such as those found in mining camps, frontier towns, settlements, bunkhouses. The presence of lice and other vermin could cause intense itching, discomfort, and skin irritation, making it essential to eradicate them. The Old West was characterized by rough living conditions, so that you're gonna find lice, poor sanitation, lack of clean water, limited access to bathing. Well, once again, you're gonna get lice, you're gonna get pests, it's not fun. Nitpickers had to work in these unsanitary environments, often without proper protective gear, because it didn't really exist yet, or any other protective measures, which means their risk of exposure going all the way up. Removing lice and nits required close physical contact between the nitpicker and the infested individual, be it animal or human. This meant handling dirty, greasy hair and meticulously combing through it to identify and remove lice and eggs. The process was time-consuming, labor-intensive, and required patience, dexterity, and attention to detail. Nitpicking was often associated with poverty, poor hygiene, and social marginalization. Nitpickers were sometimes viewed with disdain or disgust by others in the community, leading to social ostracism and discrimination. This stigma could make the job even more unpleasant and emotionally taxing for those who performed it. Also, lice infestations were not only a nuisance, but also a potential vector for disease transmission. Scratching bites caused by lice could break the skin, leading to secondary infections and the spread of pathogens. Nitpickers were at an increased risk of contracting illnesses such as typhus, fever, trench fever, which those were kind of common. Few jobs existed for women in the Wild West, and many folks resorted to body selling as a way to earn a living. These ladies were called soiled doves though, which totally adding that to my fun list of words to avoid censors with on the interwebs. Most soiled doves were widows with few skills, or daughters of ladies who grew up familiar with the occupation. Soiled doves made up as much as 25% of the population in some towns. Needs had to be met, and the market was there. This was before naughty videos, folks. People needed the real thing more often, and earned $1 to $5 per customer. High-class ladies could earn as much as $50 an hour, but that was rare. They lived in parlor houses, with up to 12 women sharing a house at a time. Many women married after retiring from the life, while others were married throughout their careers to saloon or brothel owners who appreciated the extra income. Many soiled doves did struggle with addiction and sadly took their own lives because of the mental anguish that accompanied the position. So I left being a miner until the end of today's list, since I wanted to focus on jobs that are less popular in modern day first. If you weren't aware of how prevalent gold mining still is, especially in Northern Ontario, Canada, allow this to be an urge to tell you to look more into it. I grew up in a town that still relies on the gold mines being successful to survive, so I know a thing or two about them. If I didn't, I'm pretty sure my dad would have disowned me by now. We came pretty close to fighting the year that I confessed that I prefer silver on my Christmas tree over gold. I kid. Love you, Dad. So back in the day, being a miner was pretty icky. They typically worked long hours in dark, cramped underground tunnels or open pit mines where conditions were pretty dirty, unsanitary, really bad. They're exposed to, let me count the things, dust, dirt, grime. They had limited access to clean water for washing, bathing. You were inhaling all these dust particles, leading to respiratory issues such as black lung disease and a lot of other problems. Over time, the accumulation of dust in the lungs could cause chronic coughing, wheezing, difficulty breathing, contributing to overall discomfort and reduced quality of life. I almost forgot they were also exposed to heavy metals such as lead, mercury, arsenic, volatile chemicals such as cyanide and sulfuric acid, and harmful gases like methane and carbon monoxide. These substances could leach into the air and water supply, posing serious health risks to miners and nearby communities. Prolonged exposure to toxic substances could result in poisoning, organ damage, and long-term health problems. Personal hygiene was pretty often neglected, leading to the accumulation of sweat, body odor, filth, and that's without the constant risk of injury or death from cave-ins, explosions, collapses, falls, equipment malfunctions. Accidents were commonplace in the mines back in the day, and miners suffered some really bad injuries. We're talking crushed limbs, severe burns, head trauma, the presence of gore, bodily injuries. Not good for the psyche, folks. And that's it for me once again. I've been Alexa, and if you enjoyed my ramblings today, could you help us out by giving this video a like, subscribing if you aren't already, hit the bell to stay up to date, and I'll see y'all next time I buzz in over here at Bumblebee.